Hey guys, what's going on? This is Program with Pags here, and I'm going to build a tutorial with you guys on Next.js 14 and TypeScript. This tutorial is going to be for all levels. I hope regardless where you're at any part of the totem pole, there's something to learn here. So let's go ahead and dive in. So all I've done so far is just pull open VS Code. I just made a folder, an empty folder that is titled Next.js. And I'm going to drag and drop this folder into VS Code. And down here in my terminal, if it's not open, go ahead and open your terminal. You could press Control and tilde on Mac or find the terminal tab and fire that open. And I'm going to go ahead and say npx create next app, create dash next dash app at latest and dot slash. The dot slash for saying that I'm creating it in this specific folder that we just named. And next is great. Next is awesome. It pops up with a bunch of these configurations that we can now add to our projects. So me personally, I use TypeScript in all of my professional career. I've actually every employment that I've ever had, TypeScript was involved. So I would highly recommend it. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes here, and I'll have a video on TypeScript as well down the road. ESLint, absolutely. These are linting rules, code quality, Tailwind CSS, amazing for style sheets. Source directory is kind of getting deprecated. App router, very much in style, so I'll say yes for that. Would you like to customize import alias? No, the @star is fine. So boom, and as you can see, quickly pops open our Next.js project. You can see that it's uploading. It's configuring all of the things. And being that this is a Next.js with TypeScript tutorial, that's hugely important. So I have a few shorts on TypeScript. They're a little bit higher level, bird's eye view. And here we're just going to get a little bit more granular. We're still going to keep the concept simple, but I want to show building with TypeScript and what that could look like. So all I'm doing now is just firing open a local host and pulling up my dev server on the right here, as you can see. So that's popped up now. Next.js, this is just our starter template that every Next.js project comes with out of the box. So I'm going to pop open the app folder. You could see our next build folder here that gets generated whenever we run a server. And you might deal with layout and caching, or layout chunk errors and caching errors. Likely, if that ever pops up for you, if you see a chunk layout command, just delete your build folder. And every time you run a server, you could see it already popped one up. So all it'll do, it'll just compile all the latest code if there's any potential changes. And you usually don't even have to do that. Just sometimes there's maybe a tiny thing. So consider that a potential route to fix small rendering bugs. You can see we have our app folder just with predominantly all of our layout stuff, our pages, our TSX, our global CSS exist in here, our favicon exist in here. You can see we have our node modules for any NPM packages, our publics folder. Your public folder actually is very relevant for PWAs and generating manifest files. You can see other things, the ESLint that we chose. We can put our rules in here. We have our git ignore if there's any certain packages or folders or environmental variables that we want to hide from our git repo. We would obviously put that all here. Next env to declare any types that maybe don't come out of the package in npm packages. Our config, again, for PWAs and other things. Yeah, there's a ton more. Our Tailwind config, our README, all that stuff we can configure at a high level here. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'll leave that for you guys when you're building your projects and need to mess with configurations. I'm just giving you a bird's eye quick run through, just 2-minute blip that again, remember that there's these things that, if you have any configurations, feel free to look at them. Feel free to dive in. I know. I actually had a guy reach out on LinkedIn and say, hey, can you make more junior friendly content? This stuff is a little higher level. But this is where I want to take an opportunity and say, no, these config files, all this stuff, do not be afraid to dive into it. Don't view yourself as a junior. I can't touch these things. View yourself as, no, let me figure it out. There's other human beings who are, maybe they have a dash of experience, but they're not smarter than you. They're not objectively out of a completely different IQ level than you, that you can't mess with config files or something. It's like, no, mess with them, break a few things, see how it goes. If it breaks, undo it. It's not a big deal. So just want to give you guys that little blip, but let's dive into the app folder. The app directory is where we're going to spend a lot of our time just building code. So I want a bit of a quicker thing today. All I'm going to do is delete this real quick, just the main to main. So I just shrunk all that. Let me close the terminal. I just shrunk all that and highlighted it really quick. So I'm just going to close it and pop a div here, and I'll say homepage. And I'm going to open back the terminal, and it is running. So let me just refresh the page, make sure it says homepage. Just give me a sec. I just want to make sure everything's lined up before we depart on the tutorial. So boom, there it is. We see the homepage. So we know that the server's up. We know that we have our Next.js project. Let's dive in. It's just going to be a simple thing. All I want to cover today is kind of a front to back build, almost to the full back end. We're going to build a basic to-do list, and I think this is perfect for all levels. Not just the to-do list of, hey, let's just build a front end component, but we're actually going to query some APIs. And I want to show you guys how that looks in Next.js in a really streamlined fashion. It's amazing. So if that's something you haven't done, this is going to be amazing for you. Let me lead the way and show you how to do it and how easy it is. You'll get it in no time. And if you have done it, hey, stick around. Maybe there's something that we do different, and maybe you can teach me, or maybe there's something to learn still. So let's dive in. So this will be the homepage for the to-do list. Let me just put a class name here. I'm going to zoom in, guys, so you can see a little bit better. So it's just going to say class name. I'll say flex w-full, justify center, and items center. And one last thing, min height full or screen, actually. That's what I want to do. So that's what it should look like. And we're just going to say a list page, or we could also change it. It doesn't have to be a to-do list. All it is simply a data table that queries something and shows the data. So it could be an items list. It could be a customer list. It could be, it could be a few things, an orders list. Fill in the blank. But getting the fundamentals down of building these data devices that hold data that you can scroll through, that's important. So we're not going to do pagination. I will have a separate tutorial for that. I will have a separate tutorial for linking up databases and all these other things. This is just going to be integration. So that's a lot of talking. Let me just kind of get in the flow for a moment. What I want to do here is build another div, and I just gave me some space. And this div is actually going to hold another div. And the div within the div, the sub div, this is going to be the beginning of our to-do list. So I want to say to-do item, right? Like this will be our item. Oh, and we need to add one thing to this parent div right here. It says flex. We need to say flex - call to make everything stack on top of each other. So this to-do item is where our to-do item is going to exist. We'll have many to-do items. So maybe we'll have 3 of them. And what I want to say in this class here is flex - call with full, this div on line 7. And I'll say background gray, we could say -900, right? So you can see we're building out this background, this separate component from the list page title. So in fact, I'm not going to say with full. I'll I'll say width 10 divided by 12. Do something a little bit smaller than the page width. 10 divided by 12. Something like that is fine. I'll say P-8 to give us a little padding. Say rounded MD. Say shadow. I personally always like to add just a little bit of shadows on stuff. And I'll say MY4 just to give us a little space from that list page. So we have almost a, and I'm going to change this padding to padding-4 actually. Not a huge deal if yours looks a little bit different. Not the end of the world at all. Build it as you need it. So this to-do item, let's style it up a bit, right? We're going to say class name, BG, actually I won't say background white, forgive me. But I will say background gray, maybe 700, right? I want them to be cards within the list or a list of these items that, so I'm going to hit Command X, and let's see how that kind of looks. Yeah, so it looks okay. But the thing is we would need to round the top one, right? And then we would need to round the bottom one. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that in a list in a moment here. But we need to keep track of that with the data. So let's do a thing real quick where we're going to now start to integrate TypeScript and make this a data bit. So me as a front-end engineer, I want to start on building front-end components as I roughly see them. And I'm always a sucker for putting in hard code. But when I'm at a point where I see the rough idea, okay, here's my list, here's what it kind of looks like. I want to get to data as quick as possible, as soon as possible. Reason being, you're gonna have to deal with data a lot. There's things you got to deal with, queries, fetches, a ton of things. So let's build out our to-do fully, right? And maybe I don't want to build out the data bit 100% right now. Let's build out the to-do fully. So first we're gonna have this to-do title, right? So maybe you're looking at your Figma documentation. You recognize these things. Let me delete these bottom two to-dos real quick. We'll bring them back in. Don't you guys worry. So we should have this right here, this div with a div within it. And the reason why I'm doing a camel casing like this is because I'm starting to think about the data. So I have a to-do title. Maybe I have a to-do like category. Maybe I have like this piece of data that is something else. To-do completed. Maybe it just signifies if the to-do is completed or not. And let me give you an example of this. So if I go to YouTube, you want to think in data terms. So if I look at this video, all I'm defining here is just kind of what I see. So maybe one parameter is like the video thumbnail. So my data would have that bit in there. I would say video thumbnail in camel casing. The next bit, I have a video title, it looks like. So call it whatever you want, like video headline, video main description. But for me, it looks like a video title. That would represent that piece of data. Then we have a video subdescription. So maybe the video secondary text or video subdescription or description. All those names are perfectly fine, but you want to get a lens of looking at things with the data lens. So this third line, it says sponsored, but maybe on the data side, I would say video sponsor, something like that. So we want to define the structure of our data is all I'm saying. So if we go back to our to-do list and we know we want a title, we know we want a category, we know we're going to have a to-do ID, a few things like this. Let's go ahead and build out the data for this. And I know it looks a little bit funky, guys. So let's actually add a flex right here. And we'll say with that dash full, justify between, so it spreads everything out. It's all on the same line. That card exists on the same line. And let's build this data out. So this data right here, I'm going to come up to the top of the screen. I'm going to say type to do. And I need to do an equals and then open up my curlies. And you always want to start your data, at least majority of the time, with a ID. So I always preface my types with the type I'm building. So if I did a video, I would say video ID. If I was building a task, I'd say task ID, but we're building a to-do, so I say to-do ID. But however you want to do it is appropriate. Some people just do ID like this, but that's not me. So I'm going to say to-do ID. It just keeps it easy for me down the road when I'm handling data in different areas. Just streamlines my workflow, but do what works for you. But I'm going to say to-do ID, then we'll say to-do, and we're just going to steal all of these ones. So to-do title, that's going to go there. I'm going to define it as a string, just because it's going to be text value. Maybe your ID could be a number value. Then I'll take this one, to-do category, say to-do category, string, boom. And to-do completed, this one's going to be a Boolean. So it's just going to be a 1 or 2 value, a true or false. And you could use a number. Like data types can be used interactively. Like you could literally use 0 and 1 if you wanted to use numbers. That still represents a Boolean. That's how programmers did it for a very long time. So, but point being is we now have a to-do type built out. We now have our structure for a to-do here and ready to go. So we can now make a ton of these cards, tens of them, in the same structured format every time. And this is why TypeScript is really, really important. I know a lot of people say, well, there's TypeScript gymnastics, there's all these things, but it's really, really, really important that we follow the same models of data. You know, if you're working with a team or a future code base with other people, they need to be able to come in there and say, well, how is this shaped? What's this all about? So TypeScript's really important. But let's go ahead and build some mock data. So I'm going to take this to-do type and I'm going to build something, a bunch of to-dos. So I'll say const to-dos equals, I'm going to open it up with an array. And in this array, I need to model this data. So I'm going to steal every piece of data, right? So I'll say to-do, and it says it's a string. So I'll just give it a number 1, make it a string. Not thinking too much about it, guys, just following the steps. And the second step, to-do title. So I'll take that, I'll do a string value here, and I'll give it a title. I'll say go to gem. Sounds like a to-do title that I might need to do. We have a to-do category. Maybe we don't need a to-do category, but that's fine. I'll say it's part of the health category, right? Then we have to-do completed. I'll say true. That's fine. Now we have one to-do with data labels associated with it. So all these labels will show here in this card. And we now have one piece of data fully built out that is modeling our to-do. And how do we know it's modeling our to-do here? Well, let's make sure that our type is modeling our to-do. So we can go to const to-dos, and I say colon, and then I add our to-do here. But you can see we're getting a red underline. And the reason is because it's not just a to-do, it's an array of to-dos. So how we notate that in TypeScript is we throw a to-do right here with the array symbol. And now we can make a ton of to-dos, and our types will all be the same. So I'm going to delete all that. You guys did not need to do that. And I do want to make one more to do though, or at least 2 more, maybe 1 or 2 more, right? Let's give the second one a to-do ID. And instead of go to gem, I'll say make dinner maybe, right? I guess it's still relevant to health, and I'll put false. Hasn't been done yet. Let's build one more, right? So to-do ID, we'll say 3. And what's a good to-do? Brush teeth. Well, these are all health related, so maybe I won't do that. I'll say study for exam. And then the category education, right? And now we kind of have 3 bits of data that are all modeled in the same format. And we notice, otherwise it would throw an error, right? If we had one of these models missing, we'll see TypeScript will throw an error. It'll say, no, the data is not correct here. And I recognize that when I first learned TypeScript, I looked at this part and I was like, well, why is this relevant? Wouldn't I just not care? Can't I just do this and it's all good? And you absolutely can. What I used to call it, what I've heard friends call it as well, is TypeScript gymnastics. Why the TypeScript gymnastics? Why is it relevant? it's relevant because we're going to be dealing with a ton of data. I'll give you guys an example. With my application team syncer, I'm building out a ton of components, and there's a few users on it now. There's 70 users, and when I look at it, right, when we pull up, let me just pull up the database. There's tasks. There's descriptions. There's projects. There's a lot going on. So there's 126 projects. And you can see that they're all labeled. They all have their ID. They all have their project status. Some of them don't. I did make it conditional, so I'll cover that in a video in the future. But majority of the data coming in is matching the same title, the same project status, and the same name. Now, a lot of these are test projects. A lot of them are me. But I'll go to the users as well. And if I show you guys some of the users, these are my test emails right here. So, but I know some of these are not. I don't want to disclose their emails. Yeah. So like this person, I did just dox their email. Forgive me, but there's a few emails and there's 70 users, but I need to format the data in the same all the time. So being that there's, probably six or seven accounts that are mine, I'm testing to make sure my user functions work, my posting functions work, because when you're dealing with real production things, you need these things to work bulletproof. It's important to retest, test again. So here's a new feature, is this report function that I'm generating. And again, I need this data to be in the same format every single time. And when I'm taking on users, and again, I have a user count that just simply tracks numbers, that can be a little bit less intensive. But when we look at other things, right, subscriptions, and see who has a premium subscription, see who has a free subscription, right? I need to know whose subscription status is what. So that's where a lot of these subscriptions are tied with user IDs, and I need to know that. So, I handle error cases, but the fundamental thing that I'm trying to get across to you guys is you need your data to be structured when you're dealing with all these APIs, because you can see on the left there's a ton of different data bits in this thing. There's bugs. There's and let's see what some users have said. User can't navigate the dashboard. That was a real user's bug. This is another one. NAN is showing at the top for the project. It keeps it easy when I know, this person's talking about a bug, because it says bug description, bug title. This person says, this was me, this is a live test, that's my user ID, but this is someone else. First of all, great project. Second, when you click on some link on the sidebar, boom. The thing I'm just trying to educate you guys is I can't have this just say description, and I can't have random things when a user's posting stuff. So it's really, really, really imperative to keep track of your types and build these strong structures that will last across time, and most importantly, let you know what the data is about. So the reason for that second bit too is I've seen engineers who do stuff like this, like, I'll just put I here, I'll just put T here for title, I'll put C here for category. But if I'm a new user, I'll never know that. If I'm, or not a new user, but a new developer for a team, I'll have to ask questions every day. What is this T? What is this I? What is this P? What is this V? So don't do things like that. I would prefer verbose code than not verbose code personally, at least when it comes to naming. I would much rather have it say, no, this is what it is. This is the piece of data. This is what it is. This is the piece of data, and just consistently do that. So just wanted to give you guys a live example, but let's dive back into building the to-do list. So here are my to-dos. I want to copy this to-do down, and we're going to build out some of this mapping now. So I'm going to go right here below this div. I'm going to open up a curly bracket, put to-dos, press map, and do .map, and say to do, and then I'm going to arrow function into all of this right here. So I'm going to go down, copy it, press Command C, delete it, and I'm going to open this up. So we look like this. I'm going to put 2 React fragments here, and then pop that pasted text in. And you can see now we have 3 titles pop out, or three cards pop out, if you will. So that's how we know that this data is linked up now to this to-do list, that the to-dos.map is linked up to our to-dos data. Reason being is because if I add another, for instance, I should see a 4th, and there it is. So this is an easy Mockshift way for me to build data on the front end and prep my components to start receiving data from the back end. That's all I'm doing. Let's now build this out a little bit more. So I'll say to do, and I'll come down to my to do title here, and I'll wrap this to do title in curlies. Then I'll say I'll go to the other side and say to do dot to do title. And then I'll do that for all of them. So I'll wrap this one in curlies. I'll say to do dot category. I'll do the same thing here. I'll wrap it with curlies and say to do dot to do completed. And you'll see on the left, or on the right, excuse me, all those things just got populated. Now we can't see the Boolean value, it's just true, false value, but what we can do is declare if it's completed or not completed, right? So we should see that value now, completed, not completed, completed, not completed, right? But now we're accessing this data directly in our front-end component. And we still have it as front-end data, which is perfectly fine. But we're going to make it back-end data in a moment. So let me take this rounded out. It's kind of messing things up a little. And it just looks square. It looks really ugly. Let's kind of clean these cards up a bit. So on line 38, I'm going to say P-4 to give our cards a little bit more space. And then I want to do one thing with this class name. I'm going to conditionally render a top and bottom rounding. So to do that, I need to go to the to-do up here. I need to add a comma. And this is our I. This is our index. Now, I always declare index IDX this way. That's because of Clement, the Google and algo expert YouTuber. Very good guy. And I'm going to take this index and I'm going to utilize it in the class name. So to do that, I'm going to give this an open curly and a closed curly. And I'm going to wrap it with these backticks. So there's 2 backticks back here, and then I'm going to go over here to the left and just add another backtick. So I have class name, open curly, backtick, all of our class stuff, close it with a backtick and an ending curly brace. And now I can add this IDX to conditionally render things in here like this. I can now use this as a piece of logic to show different CSS classing. So let's do that. I'm going to say todos.length, if that equals the index, but I need todos.length -1. There's a rounding error, right? We're taking the length of this, which is 3. The length is 3, but the index started 0. So these indexes would be 0, 1, 2. So I just want it to all be the same. So I'm going to say todos.length -1, or I could say IDX +1. They would both allow for that. And then I'm going to say question mark, if todos length -1 equals the index. So if the todos length -1 is 2 right now, equals the index 2, I want you to do rounded -b -md. Else, nothing, do nothing. And you'll see that that rounds the bottom corners of this last to do. No matter which one's the last one, it'll always round the last to do's corners. And the other thing that we can do is add another piece of state here, or another bit of logic. I'll copy and paste this to do's. Well, actually, we don't need to copy and paste it. We can just go above right here, say index equals 0, and I need this to do something here. So I'll say rounded top MD, and then after I'll give it the semicolon or the colon. And that'll round the very first to-do. No matter how long our list is, it'll round the top one and the bottom one. So if we have 10 to-dos, we don't need to keep track of the rounding anymore. It's already handled. It's handled programmatically. So let's test that out. If I copy down 4 of these, boom, you can see the first one's always rounded and the bottom one's always rounded. So I'm going to delete those and undo that. But that's just a tiny little trick here to make sure our list is always proper. Awesome. So let's maybe darken this just a smidge. I'll add a shadow.md. And let's maybe add just a little hover, right? Hover. I'll say BG gray, and we'll do that 700 for it. So boom, I can kind of see which one I'm hovering over. I'll say cursor pointer, right? Boom. And we got ourselves a little bit of a to-do list. Now, the one thing I might want to add is just a bit of a table header here, just to say, hey, here's the top bit and here's the bottom bit. So, or excuse me, not the top bit, but the title, the category, and is, or status maybe for completed. So that'll almost work perfect. We just need to go to the div on line 36. Oops. Say class name equals width dash full and flex and justify between. And that should pop them all out to where they need to go. And we need to do one last thing and say px4 because we have padding on the children contents. That should balance it out. And then I could say opacity 50 and my2 just to kind of make it a little bit faded, or even mb2 should be fine. But just that way we have a general idea of what we're looking at. Here's kind of the title, here's the category, here's the status. So awesome, guys. This is almost all the front-end components we need. Let's now do some API integrations. And Next.js makes that really, really, really useful. Really easy. Really, really, really easy. So I'm going to pop open the Explorer and I'm going to copy and create a folder down here. And this folder is going to be labeled pages. You can do API stuff in the app directory, but we're going to focus on the pages directory right now. And in the pages directory, I'm going to make a folder called API. And in this API folder, I'm going to make a file called todo.ts. And in this todo.ts, let's see, guys, actually do have a little guide here below because I just want to make sure I'm getting this handler correct. I always mess it up all the time. So I need to import Next API request and Next API response from Next. This will help us define our handler. And this is the handler that I usually mess up. So here's what it looks like. We have export default function handler, and we have request. We're going to define the type here with the Next API request, comma, the response is going to be Next API response. So now it's type safe. You can see we have a red underline on the Git to-dos, guys, and there's going to be all this code in the description as well. I've got a repository for you guys in the description of all this code. So so look there right now. If you're like, gosh, I'm falling behind the to-do list thing, pop into the repository, steal the code. Not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. We're about learning here. So let's go ahead and we have our case here. This is a switch method, right? So every request, I'll have a video on CRUD functionality as well. But there's git, post, patch, delete, and a few. I'm missing one. Git, post, patch, delete. I'm missing one, guys. I'm missing one. But I'll have CRUD functionality for you guys. A video on that as well, breaking down these things, and we'll do it in Next.js as well. Or maybe I'll do a Vue tutorial or something else. But I'll certainly make one in Next. But we have our Git case, which is just going to be querying data. It's just going to be reading data. That's all it does. We're not going to interact with it today. We're not going to do deletions. We're not going to do updates. We're not going to do patch requests. We're just going to query the data. And let's build this function. So it's going to be a function here that is going to be async function, right? We'll say get to do's, and you can see my tab 9 is helping me here, right? Love to see that. So next API request, and we want the response to be next API response. Boom. So our responses are type safe, our requests are type safe. Let's build out our get to do's. Now we're going to do a little bit of a shortcoming just right before databases. I'm going to have a video on databases and linking up to Prisma or MongoDB or MySQL or Postgres, but that's not going to be today. We're going to do something a little bit easier just to get this API working. And being a Next.js developer, this is something that I would recommend taking this approach immediately, because I've done this to trouble fix so many things. And that's going to be taking this data that we just built on the back end, or excuse me, on the front end. We're going to take this data, this to-do list, all that data, that JSON data, let's copy it, and we're going to put it in the back end. And this can now test our API very effortlessly. You can see we have an underline. We need to import the to-do type. So what I can do is take this to-do type and just drag and drop it in. But if you saw one of my shorts, the smarter thing to do is take your types and put them inside of a new folder. So let's build that folder real quick. I just opened up my Explorer. I copied this, so I have that in my copy command. I'm going to open a folder, or I can make a file, either or, and say types.ts. And I'm just going to paste it in there. The important thing is I need to make sure I export it. So export type to do, R to do. And now I can go to my front end page and say import type, type curly brackets to do from @types. And now I can go to my backend, the to-do.ts. You can see we have some red underlines. Don't worry about it for right now, guys. Not a big deal. I'll go to the backend as well, and I'll go to line 2, and I'll import the same thing. Import type to do from @types. And you can see that fixes our error. So the next thing we need to do, we have our try catch block built out. I just need to say res.status 200 to indicate that the server request was completely fine. The API was working great. And then I'll say res.send to-dos. And that will send us our to-dos to the front end. Excuse me, I think it's actually res.json. Well, let's try both. Let's see if we could break something, right? And then in the air, what I can do is say res.status 500, and this indicates an internal server error, so we know if there's an error. And I could say .json, do this, and I think do message and internal error, or internal server error is fine. In this way, when we get a response from this API, we now know if there's an issue or not. We'll either get a 200 with all the to-dos, or we'll get a 500 where there's an issue. So let's go back to the front end now, and we need to integrate Axios. So I'm going to open up the terminal. You can ignore all the errors right now. It's just an error because we don't have any to-dos on the front end. So ignore it. It's okay right now. Not a big deal. Get comfortable breaking code. Not a big deal. Let's close out of the terminal. We're going to say npm I Axios and then @types/Axios. And we're going to install Axios to help fetch some backend stuff and use our API. And then we're going to download the types, obviously, to be type safe. So what we need to do is import Axios now from Axios. And if you're getting a red underline here, it's either because you didn't download Axios or you didn't download the types. So make sure to download the @types/Axios as well. I also need to import use effect from React. and we're going to fetch the to-dos from the backend. We're going to make it happen full blown, like you do in the real deal with the real server, with the real database. It's the full blown deal. So I'm going to start by saying function fetch to-dos. It's going to take nothing in the parentheses. We're going to open it up with some curlies, and I'll say, I could do a try catch, but let's just keep it easy. I'll say const response equals, we're going to do actually make this a sync function, excuse me. I'll say await axios dot get. I'll say backslash API slash to-dos. And the reason why we said API is because it's going to this part in our folder when we do a fetch request. Next.js automatically handles it. It's saying, okay, go to the API, and then I say backslash to-dos. Oh, we actually need to say to-do because that's what we named our file. Or I need to change the file name to to-dos. Either or, but these two things need to match, this to-do and the to-do here. Or if we call it whatever, it needs to be whatever here. So let's console log this response and see what comes back. And then finally, we just need to fetch this, guys. And I know there's errors, don't worry about it. We need to fetch this with a use effect. So I'll make a use effect that looks like this, and I'll add a dependency array. And in the curlies, I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to put that fetch to-dos there. Oops, fetch to-dos like this. And what I could actually do is sync this entire function in the use effect like this. And now on render, we should see to-dos being fetched. So, oh, we do need to actually close out the errors finally. So I'm going to close this entire bracket thing, this entire component we built. And I'm just going to comment it out just like that. Just command backslash to comment that thing out. And let's refresh the page. We should see it all back to live. We won't see our to-dos, but we're just going to see if this response works. So I'm refreshing the page, and you can already see we have one error. Looks like an internal server error. So let's see what's going on. App, page.tsx. Maybe one of these should be, oh, marked with use client. Okay. So I need to go to the top of the file. In Next.js, they had an update with server components and what's it called? Not server components, client-side components. So if we're using the front end, typically on the front end, you may want to do a server component. And we'll get to that in another episode as well. But right now we're just going to do front end and a back end. Just simple, easy peasy. So you could see my console ninja showing the response, and you could see it also in our console here. So you could see, we get the res status 200. The API worked. And this is an awesome example of why I just hard code the data in the back end. You might be like, is it a database issue? Oh, it's just a front end use client error. It's simple, easy peasy. So I'd really recommend this approach, guys. It's Lego bricks, one thing at a time. The next thing, let's pop open this data, and you could see these to-dos that we built on the back end that are now on the back end. We're successfully fetching them into the front end. You can see all of the stuff that completed, the health category that we made, the go to gem title, all of this stuff is right here. So that's good news. That means it is fetching and it is working. So let's take that response now, and we need to use state. So let's use state here. So I'm going to import it from React. I'll say use state, and under line 8, right under the function home, I'm going to define this. So I'm going to say const to-dos equals set to-dos equals use state. And we need to define this type, or we should define this type of to-do. And it's going to be a array of to-dos. So we already have that type imported, guys. I'm going to delete this next image deal. Don't need it. And we're type safe. We're using type safety. I can even make the response type safe too, saying console log.data as to do array, right? It should be that. Let's double safe these types. You don't have to, because we are setting the state to it, or will be, but just, an extra layer doesn't hurt. And I'm going to delete this console log and change it to set to-dos. So now we have all of that state, all that response.data. And again, the reason why I said response.data is just because the response gave us everything. It gave us all of this. But our to-dos, they're right here. We don't need the status right now. We don't need the status text. We don't need the headers. We need the data. And the data says, well, here's all of our to-dos. So that's why I said response.data. So we now have that response. If I console log this here on line 20 and check for to-dos, and I'll say, here are my to-dos. Let's see if this worked. So I'm going to refresh this and let's see if this fetches and does what I think it's going to do. So you can see my console ninja fetch these to-dos and boom, here they are. 1, 2, 3. So we see them again and we just see the to-dos. So it's doing exactly what I'm thinking it's doing. Now, the great part is, the clever part is we name this to-dos the same thing we named this .map function. So I'm going to uncomment this and it should actually work right away. So let's see. Boom. And there's all of our to-dos getting fetched from the backend, integrated to the front end, type safe. I mean, that's just beautiful. That's just, you can't ask for a more robust build than something like that. Just hitting it right on the nose, right? Hitting it right on the nose. So let's take count of what's happening, guys. On the front end, we just built out our component, right? Hey, here's what we want to build, a to-do list. Well, let's build it. Let's define some data. Let's kind of build what it looks like on the front end with a few things. And then let's take that data, let's build out our schemas and build out a little bit of test data, and let's pop it to the back end. And this quite frankly is our database, if you will. In the future, we would just migrate this, and I'll make a video on migrating it over to a database. And what Prisma makes it really effortless and fun. So this is effectively our database. So on the back end, if we wanted to delete data out, right, it's no different than what I showed you guys on MongoDB. This is kind of the format here. If I delete one of these objects, right, that's all these are. These are just objects. If I delete one of them, it'll actually delete it off the application. So it's a really, in my opinion, it really helped me grasp the data part of some of this front end to back end API integrations. This JSON templating really helped me a lot. So I hope it helps you guys. If there's anything else that I can iron out, you guys let me know. Please let me know. I want to be of value and super helpful. So building type safe API integrations is really, really important for me. Obviously, there's things like TRPC, GraphQL. There's just traditional fetch. There's different API integrations, but this Axios way of doing it with type safety, pointing at a types folder, I have found to be a bread and butter approach that I can always go to. And if I need to integrate on top of it, I need to do a GraphQL endpoint. I need to integrate TRPC. It is a really, really strong way to start with Next.js. So, and even with a real life production build on TeamSyncer, right? I'm using this method that I just taught you guys so many times. So, and this has real users. I know you guys saw a lot of test emails, but I promise there's like 64 real users, 64, somewhere around there, 65, something like that. A few of the emails are mine. They're test emails, but a lot of this project is built using the exact method I'm talking about, with a ton of APIs pinging off of each other, fetching tasks, fetching columns, fetching projects, fetching notes, fetching reports, fetching memberships, generating reports, like all these things, all these like crazy complicated looking things really boils down to the same process I taught you guys of just, hey, what do I need here? I need tasks. Okay, let me build out an endpoint for that. Don't focus on anything else. just hyper focus on getting this data model right. So, and then by the end of it, I can stack a bunch of these different methodologies together, kind of a lot easier in my opinion than what I've seen. So, but guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been my Next.js 14 TypeScript tutorial. I think I'm going to do one more as well with a little bit of a different build, a little bit more kind of convoluted, and a few more things. But for beginners, amazing. You know what I mean? And at advanced level, there are still really strong coding practices and patterns here that I think are useful for you. So I hope it's been a fruitful thing. And yeah, guys, looking forward to the next one. Please feel free to comment and let me know what you'd like to see next. So cheers. I'll see you soon.